the end, but they wanted the actual show trial to go ahead. The British were all for summary executions apparently, but that was overruled, and eventually the decision was taken to create this tribunal, which is sort of the precursor to the International Court in The Hague these days. And there would be judges from all four victorious powers, so the Soviets, the British, the Americans and the French. Also lawyers from all sides presenting cases, and of course there was the German side, the defendants. So they were all allowed to have lawyers, and many of their lawyers were actually ex-Nazis, so some of the people who perhaps hadn't been so heavily involved in the movement. So when it came to choosing who to put on trial, there was also much debate. They wanted to try the senior Nazis, of course, but there was also discussion about trying figures from industry who'd benefited from the Nazi regime, for example, and also from other sort of areas. So there was much debate about who should stand trial. And then the trials themselves went from November 1945 almost through till the end of the next summer. It was a very, very long process. Probably the most high-profile military figure to be tried was Hermann Goering. He was probably the most senior Nazi still alive. Of course, Hitler, Himmler and Goebbels had all committed suicide, and many other senior figures were in absentia or presumed dead. So Martin Bormann was one who was tried in that regard. They didn't know whether he was alive or dead and where he was, if he was alive. It seems that he was probably already dead by the time the trial was happened, but nonetheless he was tried in absentia. And of course there was Adolf Eichmann, the one who got away, who was also tried in absentia. But Hermann Goering was very contemptuous of the whole proceedings. He sort of sat there smirking the whole time. He didn't participate as he should have done, and he absolutely failed to recognise the authority of the court. But he was eventually found guilty and sentenced to death, but he was slipped a cyanide tablet the night before his execution, so he could avoid, I guess you could say, the inglorious death that would have come with the execution. So it's interesting to note there obviously was someone on the inside of that prison who still had sympathies for the Nazis who would slip in that tablet. Another very high-profile person who was tried there was Albert Speer, Hitler's architect. Now Speer had also been the Minister of Armaments, and it's in this capacity particularly that he was on trial. But he presented a face of repentance, and there were many who said, oh, he was the good Nazi, and he only received a 20-year sentence, which doesn't seem like very much to be such a high-profile figure in this movement. This was quite controversial. He was eventually released from prison and actually wrote a biography. There are many who thought that he was just putting on an act, and we'll never know, but in any case he did receive a lesser sentence because he was perceived to have shown remorse. And then there was Rudolf Hess. He was the guy who had fled in 1941 to the UK, and he was Hitler's deputy at the time, and the idea was that he was going to surrender on behalf of the Nazis.